Hal Sparks radio program. Every song, title, sound, and word and phrase you hear is completely within the fair use policies of YouTube. Please leave me alone because you don't know what you're talking about. Okay. That's my legal opening for YouTube, just in case they try to whinge a little bit about when we use sound clips. We got the right to use them on our radio station. Now go away. Hi, everybody in the chat room, too. Getting started. What's up? Thanks, Sam.
I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
Live exclusively for WCPT AM and FM in Chicago and streaming worldwide at chicagosprogressivetalk.com. Standing up and speaking out, here's Hal Sparks.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
Go do the bind.
Welcome to the show, everybody. There is so much debate going on this last 48 hours, I think, about not only whether or not Donald Trump has a chance of bringing back into the fold some of the minority and, quite frankly, in certain districts, majority voters that he has driven away with no little amount of skill over the course of the last 14 months, and realizing sort of in the last lap that he will need a good number of those human beings and, quite frankly, a good number of human beings who aren't those human beings, but who, and this might shock people in the modern political era and discourse, actually care about what happens to people who aren't them, which, by the way, is, if you check any kind of statistics, almost anywhere worldwide, is the majority of humans. He has lost a swath of voters. He has the lowest number with Hispanics of any Republican candidate over the last, I guess, 20 cycles, something like that. He is doing net zero with the African American community, and because of that, he has lost a large portion of the college-educated white people that, in many ways, vote Republican, seemingly for the most part, on two main issues. One being taxation. A little bit of the heritage tax, the death tax, they like to call it, and a little bit of if you start to climb out of sort of that middle or upper middle class and get a toehold into actually being rich, you don't want the tax burden to egregiously go up, and you think it's within shot. We're not talking about what I would call the lotto voters that he appeals to automatically, which is poor, uneducated, working class white people, and I don't mean uneducated in general, I mean not college educated, working class white people who, of a specific ilk, by the way, not that class in general, but of a specific ilk that believe that one day they're going to win the lottery and they don't want to give half of it to the government. They kind of make some level of voting decision on that, which is crazy. But okay, the upper middle class and middle class whites who are college educated, who have a slightly more worldly view, who are aware that there are other human beings in the world, in many ways look favorably upon the diversity and both racially and ethnically of the United States, are impressed by other cultures. Even this might shock some people in a country where 20% of people have a passport, and only, I think, 12% of that 20% actually use them. This is a group of people who, over the course of their lives, intend on using their passport and are impressed when they go to another country, actually make friends and get along with other human beings. Those folks, he started to lose over the course of the summer, not because, as some people, I believe, think, that he just went too far on a couple of places. Obviously, the Gold Star family attack on the Khans made an impact on people. But I think that impact is, he's not going to turn this around. He's not going to improve. He's not going to clean up his act. That's who he actually is. Because I think there's a swath of the public that genuinely believes that you can sell something and still, I understand with a bit of a wink and a nod, that you don't mean all of it, and you got to kind of, that's the nature of politics, and we've dealt with that for centuries, quite frankly, in this country, and how leaders have dealt with their own countries and constituents throughout the millennia. It is not that outside the realm of understanding that you can make grand statements, you'll do your best, but some of the stuff you're not really going to push on, you're just trying to get in so you can get the real stuff done. That's been an understanding in politics and, quite frankly, in leadership on a corporate level for a very, very long time. The difference is that the non-college educated white voters that supposedly are the root base of Trump, and we're going to talk today a little bit about the alt-right concept and where that description is both correct and off, and a little too a bit of a shotgun approach in some cases, and causes, I think, too much vilification in certain areas and not enough in others. And I'm always about building bridges and trying to bring people in. That being said, there's a good section of the non-college educated whites that are his root, that believe that he might start talking soft on immigration, but what he really is going to go, he'll be hard line. You can trust him on that. He'll talk all nice in front of the Mexican president, but when he comes out afterwards and gives this fiery speech, that's the real Donald. You're not choosing between two of them. You understand that he's flim-flamming your enemy, and that's okay. And they're all right with that. Unfortunately for Trump, the college-educated whites that he's been trying to lure in by his softening, which was also, some people have said, a hardening, they're not so easily convinced by that level of inconsistency. They're not so comfortable with the idea that that they can count on which side you're on. You're softening all of a sudden, but does that actually mean that the softening is real, or you being the one that's flim-flam? Because here's the question. When a politician pivots, turns, flip-flops, changes policy positions, modifies or adapts a position, the one crucial question for the voter often is, do they mean it, or are they just selling something to a certain constituency? And if that's the case, the next question is, am I the one that's being sold, or am I the one whose interest is being protected, and while other people are being sold? Obviously, the biggest indicator you have of that is consistency, is what message has carried the day more often. You can kind of bet on if 80% of the time this is what they've said is their message, and 20% of the time, or up till recently, or whatever the most recent turn is, they may be sincere. This may be a legit turn. However, as a decision-making, if you're making a decision tree to try and make the best judgment decision for you and your family and the circumstances you're in, usually, as a broad generalization, it is best to go with, this is the thing they talk about the most. So this is more than likely closest to what they really feel about the issue. And there's two elements of Trump's view of minorities in this country and the part they play in this country that is more indicative of his upcoming policy positions than whatever he could hand over to the Heritage Club to draft as a bill for him. Because it's if on the one hand you view Hispanics in this country as a zero-sum group, I don't know them. I don't necessarily trust the statistics, positive or negative. I have no emotional attachment to them as a group. I am not involved in that community. I am not aware of the depth of problems or the solutions available from that community. If you're operating from that point, and someone comes to you with a bill and says there's a problem going on in the geographical location that a lot of this community lives in, because that's more often the case. And we'll talk about Trump at the black church in Detroit in a couple minutes. If you're operating from zero sum, where you're going, I have no bias, plus or negative with these folks, then when somebody comes to you with a bill and says there's a problem here, there's a lot of theft is really low. They don't have a theft problem in this area, and we've got a lot of beat cops walking around corner stores, and it's not affecting anything. But they do have a murder problem and a gun problem. So we want this bill to help curtail gun running in these certain areas and loose guns and whatever. You're going to kind of listen to the statistic, and you're going to talk to your advisors, and you're going to make an adaptive decision to the reality of that circumstance. You're going to look at the stats, the numbers, the mechanics of that community, and you're going to go, yeah, I actually buy this. This or you might go, you know what? Since I don't have anything invested in this, you might. And I don't necessarily believe, if you look statistically across here, they don't have a murder problem any different than any other community. Maybe we have a murder problem as a society as a whole, and therefore we need to take steps overall in society to deal with that. That's one approach. The other approach is you automatically think that Hispanic Americans live in dirty squalor, surrounded by rats and tortillas, and can't speak the language of either where they're from or where they're coming to. You have this idea that crime is through the roof. Everybody wears a bandana. You have this almost 1990, after-school special view of what a Hispanic person is. Somebody comes to you with the same bill and says there's a bit of a murder problem. You go, bit of a murder problem? The murder's off the charts, and they're thieves, and we need to add this to the bill, and we need to add this to the bill, and this to the bill. And unfortunately, if you listen to the language of Donald Trump this week, that's where he comes from when it comes to, and by the way, these are all just kind of examples of the Hispanic community. This is how he feels about the black community. I would be hard-pressed to see what he would say about how Muslims live in the country. I mean, it just gets the further he gets away from a group, as far as ignorance and closeness, as far as people he is involved with, the darker his vision of how those people live seems to get. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. We'll talk Donald Trump in Detroit. We're going to talk a little bit about one of Hillary Clinton's pledges to end lead in America, and how that is a policy that could make the biggest dent in poverty in the United States of any policy position, of any politician for the last 60 years. We'll be back. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT 820 and WCPT820.com. Oh, fighting off this cough. Man. Hi, everybody. Hi, chat room. Hey, you guys. What's happening?
Can you hear that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about that? Remember that?
Lowrider? Of course.
Right.
Oh, my friend.
Right. So that one, what do you think?
Sure. I'm for it. This is, whoa. Hmm.
Under a minute.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I did not act. If you could tweet it to me, that would be awesome. Yeah, the word is that they are literally holding Fox News together with like duct tape. Till
This is Tom Hartman, and you're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT.
I see what the community, the Latino community, is going through in this America. It's horrifying. Horrifying. It's terrible. It's the worst. Terrible crime. Terrible. I have two friends who are wonderful people beyond reproach. I've spoken to both Cheech and Chong. Well, I didn't speak to them. I watched the movies, and I understand what the Latino people are going through. Mr. Trump, Tommy Chong technically isn't Hispanic. Only the Cheech character is. 50% of Hispanic people love me. The other 50% have never heard of me. That's a crime against humanity. It becomes. By the way, a little bit of breaking news. This morning, a 5.6 magnitude earthquake hit Oklahoma this morning, causing damage and tremors from Kansas to Texas. The United States Geological Survey reports a quake hit just after 7 a.m. in the north central region around Pawnee, 74 miles from Oklahoma City. Earthquake ties the strongest in Oklahoma's history. Previous record was set on November 5th, 2011. Earlier reports show some damage to buildings. Hey, what industry started up around 2010, 2011? It's not. It's they push water into the ground, and I'll remember it later. Anyways, Pawnee Mayor Brad Sewell said that the quake lasted nearly a minute, far longer than previous tremors that have lasted only a second or two. Part of the facade of an early 20th century bank building had fallen into the street downtown, but that was the only damage he knew of. Hopefully, everybody is safe there. This is one of those situations where maybe, just maybe, people in the plain states, because of the effects of fracking, will eventually come to the point where they recognize that there is no taking stuff out of the ground for decades and or forcefully of any sort that doesn't have secondary impacts. Anyways, in terms of the outreach that Donald Trump was doing, again, you have to decide whether this is whether or not it's flim-flam, and then you have to decide whether the flim-flamming benefits you or not. Because everybody seems to think that, well, the question should be he's flip-flopping, and that should kind of settle it. You can't be trusted, and why would anybody trust this guy? Well, because a certain group of human beings genuinely believes that, yeah, he's lying, but he's not lying to me, he's lying to them. And if there is a game that Trump has played the entire time, it has been winking and nodding to both sides at the same time. The problem he's having currently is that works better with certain groups than others. And when you wake up on the side that's been lied to, and some people believe they have. This week, it was odd that during the meeting with the Mexican president, his attempted Latino outreach, I don't know why nobody jumped on this, but at one point he said, first generation, second generation, third generation Mexican Americans are beyond reproach. He actually said that. He said they're beyond reproach. Does anybody remember what he said about Judge Curiel? He said that Judge Curiel couldn't actually work on this case in an ethical and unbiased way because of his Mexican heritage. I'm pretty sure linguistically that's reproach. Obviously, if you can denigrate his ability to do his job because of the fact that he's a third generation Mexican American, and then go they're beyond reproach, except that guy, is just pandering of the highest order. Now again, which side do you believe the lie from? This is sort of crucial overall to the modern political, branding style that we live in. Which side of it do you believe? Which side of the lie do you feel comfortable on? Now, I will completely. I'll give a great example of a Democratic version of this. In David Axelrod's book, he talks about how President Obama was for gay marriage from the very start. From the very beginning, he was comfortable with the idea. And Axelrod and the rest of them were telling him, no, you can't say that because you won't get elected. America's not there yet. You can go as far as civil unions. We'll try and move the goalpost a little bit and help move the country step by step. But America's not there yet. And if you think they are, if you want to go down swinging, if you want to, if you want to make a statement and then lose, that's how you do it. So go out there on that talk show, go out there on that thing, and effectively lie about your position. Say you're not there yet, that you're much more, quite frankly, conservative on this issue than you genuinely are. And if you don't, if you go out there and you speak pure, unadulterated truth, you will not get elected, and the guy who you're against will get elected, and guarantee those people don't even get that. There will be no nationwide civil unions protection. There is no upside if you don't get in office. And that is a modern political reality. The American voter operates either willfully and comfortably within that, or in total ignorance of it, and is shocked when things don't go their way once the person gets in office. And now, I don't think most of the people who listen to this show or listen to shows like it are that surprised by that process. Well, that's because you more than likely fall into one of those categories of people who, when they see a politician lying, they ask 3 or 4 questions to see which side of the lie they're on, as opposed to just the one. And you say, and the reason why certain Trump supporters are, going to go down with the ship emotionally is because they'll start saying, "Well, he understands my heart. He speaks what I think. He knows what I know, and I believe in him." Now, as much as I was an ardent Obama supporter and went door to door campaigning for him, I never found myself using that kind of language. I met people who did, certainly, but they were not the majority of people I interacted with. In a lot of these situations, insofar as who you're seeing interviewed, they're not, in the beginning, not all Trump supporters were talking like this. Now they are. Not because he's gotten better at swaying them, but because all the people who don't think like that have left, including a good section of his Latino advisory board, which
started bailing this week. We'll come back and we'll take some calls. 773-763-9278. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. We're on YouTube as well. If you go to youtube.com/Hal Sparks Live, you can watch there. Join in our chat room because our chat room is going strong and everybody's awesome in there. And hi, guys. And we'll be back right after this. Thank you, Driftglass. I have to start in on the Fox News Ailes thing because this article, I think it's from New York Magazine, is hilarious about Fox News. The crash. If there is a pride before the fall aspect of the great stories of just horrifying like the evil hubris of the Fox network that has been just marching along for the better part of 15 years, that they just stuck a cruelty flag in the ground after 9/11 and just decided to dictate public discourse for 15 years. There is how fast it is possibly going to collapse is kind of amazing, and what will make it collapse is stunning. And I remember, quite frankly, when I started on Talk Soup, we used to play clips of Fox and Friends because they were just like the Today Show at that point. It was just meant to be one of those, morning, oh, I hate Brussels sprouts. Well, we've got somebody coming on who's got a wonderful recipe for Brussels sprouts. Next up, there's a new kids movie that your kids are going to love this summer, and blah, 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 blah. I'm not aware of him caught on tape saying anything specific, Carl. This is more about just I remember hearing something about that. Let me look up, see if I can find a piece about that. But I'm basically talking about how no, that's funny. Ooh.
15 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I didn't see that story. That's awesome. Yeah, I guess there's a problem when...
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Okay, so the birth and gestation of the Trump voter has its ties to both the Tea Party, clearly, which is remnants of the old moral majority from the 80s. It's the same mentality, sort of patriotic sexual purists who just think the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket because it's full of sinners, and this
this idea that they need to, that heathens and whatnots are taking over the entire country, and it's just getting too brown, and they're getting crazy. Okay, and then the Freedom Works, that was the moral majority. That group of people is just kind of chunked along with a different label slapped on it, like a storage crate, and then Fox News. Fox News has been this, almost a psyop. Interestingly enough, not on the liberal aspect of the average American, because over time, especially if you track the libertarian growth within the Republican Party, and you track the absolute victories that Democrats have had on social issues over the past 15, 20 years, especially. And even further back, if you count Hillary Clinton's push for S-chip and certain safety net programs that are centered around things that Republicans have a real problem with, like single moms and the like. Like they believe in this kind of judgment concept, but they don't actually know they don't want to actually solve any of the problems. They just want to kind of wag a finger. One of my favorite things is, and as a parent, this one always strikes me as funny, is that when you bring up schools need more funding, which is on a national level in comparison to other first world nations, matching our scores, matching our output as far as good students and learning curves and whatnot, lining those up with other countries, it is just obvious that the sporadic and uneven funding of American schools is the issue. That's it. Is that tying schools' budgets to the local property taxes and a slight government bump is a way to create uneven students. And basically, there needs to be a baseline that is there for all public schools, and period. It just needs to bump up. There needs to be more spending on public schools. And it's not even, it's so obvious, because it's not even about, well, we don't want our kids indoctrinated and blah, blah, blah. It's that some schools have textbooks that are 20 years old, and the ones with new textbooks are written by people who want the content to be 50 years old. Hello, Texas. And so, excuse me, the most important aspect of it, is very obvious. Funding evened as a baseline. If communities want to spend more on their schools by attributing a percentage of what they get from their local tax revenue, awesome, vote that in. But as a base standard, that's absurd. And anyways, when you bring that up to as kind of a standard Republican talking point, what you get back is, well, parents need to be more involved. We need more involvement from parents, which is true and completely outside the mandate of government. So what? Yes, that's true, but you can't legislate it. You can't do anything about it. You can't write a law that makes parents take more care. You could have them show up and forcefully make parents drop one or the other off, which would have a drop in productivity if you stop doing busing and all kinds. It's absurd. The idea that you would mandate on any legal level, or even try, because the simple freedoms that we take for granted, like being able to basically move about unmolested, gets thrown out if you go, you have to drop your kid off at school and you have to be there Wednesday to talk to the teacher. If you don't, then we dock your pay at work and we tax you, blah, blah. Like, it's silly. You're never going to be able to legislate caring. But what they do is, that's their answer. That's what they'll bring up when you go, we need to pay for better schools. We need to make sure there's no lead paint on the walls. We need to make sure the water's good. We need to make sure that the books are up to date and our kids have the materials and the safe equipment to learn with and on and around. We need PE teachers. We need physical education.
and we need arts because we want our kids to be able to solve problems from more than a linear direction. And that's what that gives you. But all that's solved strictly with funding the schools. Schools are responsible for, making sure that they're a great school. Nobody wants to run a crap school. It's kind of silly. I have not liked all my teachers in my life, and nor have I thought they have all been effective. But that doesn't mean they didn't start and get up every day with the idea that they're going to make this better. I think a lot of people project their modern parenting attitudes onto teachers, which are incredibly lazy. That's my own personal judgment, and I will stand by it. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make is Republicans will oftentimes try to distract from legislative solutions by bringing up emotional or social answers that are outside the realm, and say this is not government's thing. Government's too big and it shouldn't be doing this stuff anyways. Parents need to take a more blah blah blah. Well, it's not the kid's fault that their parent is lazy, dumb, ineffective, uninterested. Never will be. So from 0 to 18, the country has a vested interest in giving this child every possible chance to be the best person it can grow up to be. Because that child is going to grow up and interact with all of us. And after a few incarnations of societies over the millennia, this is the best version we've come up with for trying to make that happen. Democracy with strains of socialism and capitalism working in tension and support of each other. And so the idea that you're going to have these kind of, no pun intended, black and white or brown and white attitudes and answers to much more complex issues is silly. So then again, we find ourselves on which side of the lie are you on? So we look at, I want to address a little bit about Fox News this week, and then we're going to take some calls. Excuse me. I'm fighting the kind of cough you get from your kid's school. There are special kind of diseases that you only get when you take your child to school, and they're kind of amazing. Like it's almost like you can be excited that your child can survive these kind of like sticky, painful, sweaty illnesses so easily, whereas the adults get taken down for days. So this is an article from New York Magazine, which it's on NewYorkMag.com. I'll tweet it in a little bit. It's kind of fascinating because if there's a hubristic pride before the fall example that's better than Fox News over the last 15 years, I don't know what it is. It took 15 days to end the mighty 20-year reign of Roger Ailes at Fox News, one of the most storied runs in media and political history. Ailes built not just a conservative cable news channel, but something like a fourth branch of government, a propaganda arm for the GOP, an organization that determined Republican presidential candidates, sold wars, and decided the issues of the day for 2 million viewers. That the place turned out to be rife with grotesque abuses of power has left even its liberal critics stunned. More than 24 women have come forward to accuse Ailes of sexual harassment, and what they have exposed is both a culture of misogyny and one of corruption and surveillance, smear campaigns, and hush money, with implications reaching far wider than one disturbed man at the top. It began, of course, with a lawsuit. Of all the people who might have brought down Ailes, the former Fox and Friends anchor Gretchen Carlson was among the least likely. A 50-year-old former Miss America, she was the archetypal Fox anchor, blonde, right-wing, proudly anti-intellectual. A memorable Daily Show clip showed Carlson saying she needed to Google the words czar and ignoramus. But television is a deceptive medium. Off camera, Carlson is a Stanford and Oxford-educated feminist who chafed at the culture of Fox News. When Ailes made harassing comments to her about her legs and suggested she wear tight-fitting outfits after she joined the network in 2005, she tried to ignore him. But eventually, he pushed her too far. When Carlson complained to her supervisors in 2009 about her co-star Steve Doocy, who she said
condescended to her on and off air. Ailes responded that she was a man-hater and a killer who needed to get along with the boys. After this conversation, Carlson says her role on the show diminished. In September 2013, Ailes demoted her from the morning show, Fox and Friends, to the lower-rated 2 p.m. time slot. Carlson knew her situation was far from unique. It was common knowledge at Fox that Ailes frequently made inappropriate comments to women in private meetings and asked them to twirl around so he could examine their figures. And there were persistent rumors that Ailes propositioned female employees for sexual favors. The culture of fear at Fox was such that no one would dare come forward. Ailes was notoriously paranoid and secretive. He built a multi-room security bunker under his home and kept a gun in his Fox office. They found it after they cleared his office out, by the way. And he demanded absolute loyalty from those who worked for him. He was known for monitoring employee emails and phone conversations and hiring private investigators. Watch out for the enemy within, he told Fox's staff during one company-wide meeting. Taking on Ailes was dangerous, but Carlson was determined to fight back. She settled on a simple strategy. She would turn the tables on his surveillance. Beginning in 2014, according to a person familiar with the lawsuit, Carlson brought her iPhone to meetings in Ailes' office and secretly recorded him saying kind of things he'd been saying to her all along. I think you and I should have a sexual relationship, should have had a sexual relationship a long time ago, and then you'd be good and better, and I'd be good and better, which is, ugh. Sometimes problems are easier to solve that way, he said in one conversation. I'm sure you can do sweet nothings when you want to, he said another time. After more than a year of taping, she had captured numerous incidents of sexual harassment. Carlson's husband, sports agent Casey Close, put her in touch with his lawyer, Martin Hyman, who introduced her to employment attorney Nancy Erica Smith. Smith had won a sexual harassment settlement in 2008 for a woman who sued former New Jersey acting governor Donald DeFrancesco. I hate bullies, Smith told me. I became a lawyer to fight bullies. But this was riskier than any case she tries. Carlson's Fox contract had a clause that mandated that employment disputes be resolved in private arbitration, which I think, and this is just me, we're going to take a break when we come back. I think when it comes to sexual harassment specifically, between the people who are actually running, if it was between employees, let's say management level to management level sexual harassment, vice president to manager, director, blah, 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 I can see how that might be worked out in arbitration. But if you actually run the place, there is no arbitration when you run the place. There is no point where you look at, we'll just sit across the table from each other, me as the person who wants to be, employed, and you as the person who owns the building, essentially, and can do whatever they want here, and we'll arbitrate it. Like that's silly. So outside, when it's top level stuff, arbitration I think should go out the window. That's my own personal feeling. Anyways, this is, they are now saying, I'm going to read a little bit more of this, and we'll take more of your calls after the 773-763-9278. We're going to, once this came unglued, stuff about how Megyn Kelly was treated, how Bill O'Reilly acts towards his both female colleagues and others, it's obvious that they're huffing their own paint over at Fox News. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. I would caution you against the overuse of the word misogyny, and here's why. Because in the circumstance where a lot of these women find themselves, especially when you find yourself in like the South, this idea that this sort of patriarchal approach to relationships is not just appealing to one side. It is not just the men who enjoy the arrangement and the women just kind of suck it up. There is a cultural comfort with the men in charge, women in the support role thing that has been going on for millennia. It's hardly American, and it certainly
has its roots in, more in Judeo-Christian patriarchy than some sort of democratic patriarchy. This is not unique to the United States or Western culture. It is not uncommon worldwide, and they're not just people who involve themselves in it because they have to. They're people who seek it. Yeah, there's a lot of these guys. If you just say, if you essentially say it's misogyny, that they hate women, that's not the case. It may be patriarchal, but it's not misogyny, because in their minds, oddly enough, they think they're doing women a favor. You know what I mean? They think, women are happier in that role, and a lot of the women around them, either through tacit experience, or
30 seconds, and we have 3 callers.
Excellent. Okay. Either through tacit, just kind of habit, or because they genuinely like it, or because they have, a father absent from the home, the old, stripper cliche, to, the natural proclivity of certain, different cultural groups within whites, within blacks, within Hispanics, that they don't run from it. It's
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
So one of my favorite quotes from this article is, and this is the most telling part, and this is where a lot of people believe that Trump is actually, outflanking all the other Republican primary opponents in one major category, in that a lot of those guys are just running to sell a book, and that Trump has decided to just aim a little higher. That instead of, he doesn't actually want to be president, but what he wants to do is start Trump TV and launch it. This is probably one of the most indicative parts of this article, and this is getting quotes from people who are anonymously speaking at Fox. Several staffers have been described feeling like being part of a totalitarian regime whose dictator has been toppled. That surprises no one, by the way. No one knows what to do. No one knows who to report to. It's just mayhem. That's amazing to me, said a Fox host. As details of the Paul Weiss investigation have filtered through the offices, staffers are expressing a mixture of shock and disgust. The scope of Ailes' alleged abuse far exceeds what employees could have imagined. This is another quote. People are so devastated, one senior executive said. Those I spoke with have also been unnerved by Shine and Brandy's roles in covering up Ailes' behavior. Many people I spoke with believe that the current management arrangement is just a stopgap until the election. As of November 9, there will be a bloodbath at Fox, predicts one host. After the election, the primetime lineup could be eviscerated. O'Reilly's been talking about retirement. Megyn Kelly could go to another network, and Hannity will go to Trump TV. Now, I could almost guess that it's Greg Gutfeld who said that, because he's probably one of the people at Fox who's done the most talking as far as that Trump TV is a reality. Like, every time it comes up, he's obviously speaking out of school on a certain level, but he's letting loose what's in the meeting. He's when he goes out, he starts to roll his eyes up and go, "Oh, here it comes," and knows that they're going to be in direct competition with this, and that basically he's been Skyping their, sniping their audience the entire time. Let's take some calls. 773-763-9278. Who do we have, Lady B?
We have Paul from Seattle.
Excellent. Hey, Paul, welcome.
How you doing, Hal?
I'm great. Go ahead.
Great. Well, part of what you're talking about here is I think what Trump is doing, I understand about the Trump TV and all that, but he's successfully kind of delegitimizing the entire Republican voice.
Yeah.
And I think a resounding defeat in November will help to seal that for all the people. I mean, you think of it this way: he's sort of done away with 16 also-rans who can really never be taken seriously again,
Right.
as candidates, because if you lose to Donald Trump, I think you're done pretty much. It'll be interesting to see what happens to Marco Rubio in Florida with the Senate race. Now he'd be running against Patrick Murphy, right? I think.
Yeah,
will,
honestly, I think there's an element of, grain of salt to be taken that, insofar as that his opponents are done, because if he loses in a landslide, and it's essentially a reboot for all of them. Like everybody who was on that stage can go, I told you it would have been better if it was me, and they all will. I guarantee it. They will.
Well, that's true. They will try to say that. They tried to say when Mitt Romney lost.
That's right.
He wasn't a real conservative. I mean, they're going to do that, I guess.
But he only lost by 5%. He lost by a normal margin. So arguably, that there can be an argument that says, he lost because he just wasn't selling our message well enough, or he just kind of wasn't the guy. But Trump is such a divergent, and they've staked out positions in direct opposition to him that it gives them, I think, a stronger counterpoint post-election, especially for somebody as creepy as Ted Cruz to kind of, do the "I told you so, I'm the pure candidate" angle. And I think there'll be a lot of people jump on that boat after the fact. And I think a lot of, like, you watch for the midterms, when Hillary walks in there, the midterms are going to be all about, look, we're the new Republican Party, and we can work with people and blah, 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 blah. And they're going to just try to get the chambers back so that they can lock arms and play Red Rover again, just like they've done with Obama for the last 8 years.
They'll say the new Republican Party. I was thinking that after Labor Day, Trump will say, we're after the Hispanic vote, and by next weekend he'll be saying, everyone's voting for me, there's no reason to have an election, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's about where he's going. So they do have this bubble in terms of, and I'm sure should Hillary win, she will be completely, they'll say, she didn't beat anybody. I mean, in this sense, he'll say, she didn't even really win. She didn't really beat anybody. They'll try to delegitimize her victory. But one thought I wanted to share with you that occurs to me about Donald Trump, and I think, as progressives, as the Democratic side has to keep this in mind, is it seems to be that Donald Trump, I guess, has put immigration as the most important issue in America. And I thought about this week, and I thought, but it's not.
No.
It's really not important to anybody. And let me explain just briefly. It's not important to the Republicans. If it were, this 115th Congress would have passed an immigration bill, slapped it on Obama's desk, and said, hey, you sign this or we're running against you on this. And if Obama doesn't sign it, then what that does is it gives the Republican Party and all the candidates all along here, all 17 of them that were in the primaries, a chance to say, I'll sign that bill. I'm going to make that bill law. But they didn't. You see, they don't have an immigration bill. The same thing holds true for health care. They say they're going to repeal and replace. If they'd passed a health care bill and slapped it on Obama's desk, which they know he would veto, a candidate can say, I'm going to sign that. That's going to be our health care. So they really don't have anything important. They don't really care about anything, but somehow the immigration thing is Trump has put that up, number one, to energize,
motivate
racist and bigotry base, and everybody else seems to say, oh, yeah, immigration is the top thing. If somebody were to ask me, okay, Paul, what do you think is the top issue in this country? I would say wages. Wages is the most important thing on people's minds.
I agree, and it's not even the thing that they use as their reasoning about immigration very often. We got to take a break. Appreciate the call, Paul. Always great. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Excuse me. Pardon me, everyone. Pardon me. Excuse me.
Um, mhm. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, Seattle Suzuki, that's true. But they could argue that if there was I think this is part of it, um, that if by Ailes, not operating a safe space and them not positioning the space that it's not about leaving a functioning network and moving to another. It's about hostile workplace. And so your non-competition clauses, I think, can be great about can be undermined, can be greatly undermined by saying that, well, this is a hostile work environment. This is not just me. Well, certainly in New York and in certain media, you can do that. There's like, I don't know, like, I guess non-compete clauses in performance and as brands. There's certainly some of those within your contract in certain shows. Like, you can't, while I'm on a show, I can't also do another show at the same time slot on a competing network. After I leave, I can go wherever I want. A lot of the California non-competition clauses, those came out because, quite frankly, Microsoft and Bill Gates were buying up small game houses and other, they effectively did this with, or attempted to do it with Netscape and other companies. Would buy them up, basically shelve what they were working on, but they'd give everybody like a signing bonus, like $5 million to work for the company, and be like, oh, wow, that's awesome. And then make them sign a non-competition clause, which they'd gladly do because they thought they just gotten $5 million to work for the biggest computer company in the world, and then they get the rug pulled out from under them. And then they couldn't work for 10 years or some nonsense, which that had to be upturned. As much as I do have this little cold and whatnot, I proudly sweated it out over the course of 3 nights, and I actually feel great now. I've got a remnant of it, but I healed from it really quickly. It was pretty gnarly the first day. I was like, ooh, this is going to be bad. And then afterwards, I just kind of punched it in the face. I didn't have much choice. I was working all week, too. So, yeah, Mike, I think you might be right. It's a little hard to do, Carrie, when you're shaking hands with a bunch of kids all the time in volume. You can kind of do it's one of those habits that there's just too many holes in the potential of it. So. Yeah, Julie, the Trump lawsuits stuff. I think I honestly believe what we're seeing.
30 seconds.
Okay, and we have 2 more callers, Lady B, still online.
Actually, we have 5 now.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, well let's start knocking them down and getting everybody in.
Okay.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out on me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn puss-faced little pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
So we got a bunch of callers on the line, and I want to make sure everybody gets in. We only got to get Paul in during that last break because it was short. Who do we have there, Lady B?
We have Steve from the Gold Coast.
Spoke so soon. Here's all right. Hey, Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think you're onto a lot of really great topics here. For us, who understand how this process works, I mean, first of all, people stop listening to the national polling data. That would be relevant if we had a national election. We don't. Look at a state-by-state election polls. That's what matters. That's how the electoral math breaks down. So in that sense,
it's how Hillary is fighting it too.
Yeah, exactly, which is the way to fight it if you have any sense in terms of electoral politics. And given that reality, barring a miracle, she's going to be our next president. Now, what we have to do as progressives is not sit back and say, all right, fine, she's going to win by 7, 8, 9 points. No, we've got to get out there and vote and ensure that she has a mandate, that it's over 50%, that it's as above 50% as we can possibly make it, so that we can say to people, and that Republicans and others can know that, this is what the American people didn't just by a sliver choose, but in fact, by an overwhelming majority chose over your agenda, over your candidate. And in that sense, we have a mandate, because how many times have we heard after post-election, he barely got 50%. And in some cases, we've had presidents elected in the modern era that didn't get 50% because of third-party candidates. So, we've got to get out there. We've got to make sure that, that we let them know, look, we're talking about democracy. We won. We won heartily. We've taken back the House, the Senate, and we've taken enough seats so that possibly, the next time around midterm elections, we can take back the Senate. But we've got to keep hammering them with these facts. I mean, the problem with Trump's sort of grasping onto this immigration thing is that it has so many dimensions, which are economic. He likes to argue the notion that African Americans vote for me. Why? Because stopping illegal immigration vis-a-vis my plan will stop these people who are competing against you for jobs. And you all of a sudden will be magically employed if we get rid of illegals in this country, because they're the ones who. So it's pitting one group against another. And, it's the last vestiges. His base is part of the last vestiges of those people who were around in the 50s and 60s who actually thought that, they should have the right to send their kids to all-white schools.
Yeah.
There are different levels of racial discord in this country. Those are the extremists. I mean, all of us, I would contend, have some degree of bias and bigotry within us. That's a part of the human experience. But these people are open about theirs. But no, this is what I want. I would actually like the laws to be overturned so that I could send my child to an exclusively white school. That's who these people are, and he's managed to get them, in his camp. Nothing is going to.
Well, and the irony, Steve, the irony of that is that their vehemence and their new voice given by social media and Fox News gives this artificial grandiosity to the actual voice. It doesn't reflect the public in a reflective way, and I think that's why trolling has such an impact on people, because somehow the idea we're still under the influence of print and media being, almost indicative of a level of democracy too. If a majority of people didn't like it, it wouldn't be on the air, that kind of idea. And that is not the case. and what you find is that a lot of you're finding like MTV has like a show that's sort of a couple of shows bent on diversity and whatnot, but a lot of what they end up supporting in some ways is sequestering of groups based on, which the University of Chicago just rejected the safe space concept because it's effectively tantamount to racial segregation by default. And you can't, that can't be allowed because of equal protection, because we're all in this together. And if you start going, well, you know what? We're going to set this aside so every group but white people can have their own separate groups, separate walkways, separate water fountains, and oops, where did we find ourselves again? And it's fairly awful, but both sides believe that kind of element, in this point. And I think it comes a lot from that Trump idea of the 1950s that the rules only apply to me, and therefore I don't have to think about consequence.
Right, absolutely. And the idea that, at a university of all places, that I should be free from ideas that challenge not the norm for me. I mean, how absurd.
Yeah.
This is exactly why we build universities, so that you're exposed to other ideas. You do not have a right to attend a university and feel comfortable about everything you hear. That's not the point of a university.
That's exactly what, by the way, right-wing homeschoolers, that's the same reason right-wing homeschoolers keep their kids out of regular elementary school, so they can teach them, creation and not have them, poisoned by evolution. Right.
Right, and why they're terribly dysfunctional in the real world once they grow up and realize that, wow, I never learned this. Yeah, because you weren't exposed to it.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely correct with regard to the way in which, the narrative exists out there that, that this is a large swath of America, larger than it really is. Because, we on the left they're fragmented in terms of the way in which we assimilate information. A lot of us read,
And because of that, we have pet projects. Whenever you look deeply into a topic, you can only look at so many topics. You focus on some, right?
Right. We get out. We have sources of information that are varied. Now, the reason that Fox News does so well is because if you're conservative, that's where you're going. It's the only place you can go, really, on in terms of cable television. Whereas other people who run the gambit, they can go from mainstream, the ABC, NBC, CBS, to MSNBC, to the CNN. They run the gambit. They divide the rest of us amongst themselves. Whereas everyone who is conservative, by and large, goes to Fox, not because they actually are looking for enlightenment, but it turns out studies indicate it's where their ideas are reinforced, and that's why they go there. And so, I mean, but people fail to tell you when they talk about, Fox does really well in the rating. Yeah, their average viewer is about 68, which, given what we know about the death rate, how old people are when they die in this country, Fox viewers are going to be dead within a decade.
Which is why, by the way, and I need to grab another caller before the break, Steve, but I appreciate it. It's another reason, by the way, why you're seeing Trump and the rest of those courting, quote, the alt-right. The alt-right is really just campus Republicans, in all honesty. They're just the modern incarnation of effectively Trump's sons, and the angle of life experience that they have. That's not all of them, but it is the majority thought form. And the reason why Trump and his supporters, and perhaps to some degree Ailes and those ilk, are courting that crowd is because they're young. They're a generation. They have yet to, and in many ways, they are to conservatism what hippies were to liberalism. They are at a window of pure thought in their growth arc, and they have yet to mature into a balanced view. And when they do, they might split. But in this time, in this window, they're an audience worth gathering, and that's what's going on with the quote-unquote alt-right movement and those guys. They are fertile soil full of manure for anybody who wants to come along and plant whatever. So let's grab another caller. Actually, after the break, because we need to take a break right now. And as soon as we come back, we're going to get to the rest of our callers. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks Radio Program, Mega Worldwide.
Excuse me. Every time Steve gets on, I think of that line in Thank You, Masked Man, which is the Lenny Bruce bit. Thank you, Masked Man. Boy, you sure can talk some shit, boy. I've been standing here all afternoon listening to you. Look, I work for the city, buddy. You know what I mean? I got a job to do. I'm in my apartment building's media center because my internet doesn't get installed till Tuesday. That's where I am. So, thanks, Tom. Not the FBI van. No, not yet.
1 minute.
I would call it semi-permanent. The place I'm going to move into is going to require some work. So while that work is happening, I will have to have an apartment. And so I moved to Chinatown. Because if I'm going to have to live in a temporary place for a good stretch, might as well enjoy myself. That's right. Thank you, Julie. The house I'm interested in is almost entirely made of glass, and I'm not even kidding. So a hammer probably won't be the tool. Camden's, that's cool.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Welcome back. Let's keep getting to those calls. Lady B, who do we have?
We have Lee from California.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Lee. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Hal.
Hi.
Good. Okay, well, I heard you were saying at the very beginning that you were going to talk about the alt-right. And that's a subject that interests me. You're just saying now that you think it's college students. But listen, alt-right, would you include in that group, and how powerful do you think they are, the people who consider Alex Jones, David Icke, Coast to Coast? How powerful a contingent do you think that is in
Alex Jones,
the upcoming election?
Alex Jones, absolutely. David Icke, I would not. I think, and I think Coast to Coast is also, that's more your like kind of, if it affects, if you listen to Coast, and I enjoy it because we've talked about Tinfoil Hal a few times when I've filled in on, where I like going down the conspiracy rabbit hole because I think it's hilarious and fun and a great intellectual exercise.
It's very interesting, and I think it's very gripping to a lot of people. And let me just say, Hal, before you continue, that Hillary Clinton, at one point, and I heard it, she only did it once,
said she's going to release the UFO
one of
stuff.
Her campaign promises was to reveal what's going on at Area 51.
Sure.
And I thought, why is she bringing up Area 51? Does she believe that she is addressing a contingent of people that have not yet been, who are curious about UFOs and would like to,
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think, I think there are people like that, but I think it's also indicative in some ways of the distrust of government, that it's more like a signpost where you go, we all have in the back of our heads, after years and decades, quite frankly, of, the JFK assassination, the Roswell crash, that there's stuff the government doesn't tell us that we should just know. I personally believe there's lots of stuff that the government does that they shouldn't tell the public, because it doesn't. When you tell the public, it doesn't stop at the public. Everybody else knows too. And if you're trying to keep something from your enemies, you don't tell your own. You're like, hey, everybody in America, this is on whisper mode. It's silly. That doesn't work. But in the case of Area 51, it's one of those
like markers in the mysteries of government that have gone opaque for a long time. And by promising that, it counterbalances the idea that she's somehow more secretive than other people. I think it's more of a strategic verbalization of trust, whether she will or not. And I think, quite frankly, if she does, let's just say, if she says, yeah, okay, here's what's going on at Area 51, she's not going to say, here's what's gone on at Area 51. And quite frankly, a lot of people know that if you're a big fan of the Area 51 conspiracies and all that stuff, a lot of this stuff, if you watch the stories about it, moved to Wright-Patterson in Ohio, always a swing state, and the big military base that America has in Queensland, Australia, which is huge and blacked out on Google. But, I mean, that stuff is fascinating to me. But like I said, I don't think that has a political effect on people's voting. I think Alex Jones does. Because David Icke
often appears on Alex Jones's program.
Yeah, but I think it's a different channel of thought. It's very different because when David Icke goes on there, he thinks every person in command in this world, from Obama to Boehner to whatever, they're all lizard people to some degree. But Alex Jones,
interesting explanation or background on how that all, on what that all means and is what he's saying.
Sure, but Alex Jones doesn't. Alex Jones, he's very specific in his stuff, and he views himself, oddly enough, as full of beans as he is as an evangelical Christian these days. That's been a relatively new shift for him over the last maybe 7 years. And that has dictated and dovetailed much more of what he does in line with Fox News, and where he's basically been, much like Breitbart, a more extreme version. Whatever Fox can hint at, they will hit with a mallet. So the idea is that, almost working in tandem, much like the Trump campaign is doing, is that what Fox will do is, there's been questions brought up about Hillary Clinton's health. Then immediately Alex Jones will run a series of things that she's got a space worm living in her head that's giving her directions, And so this is, yes. There's a certain element to the Alex Jones crowd because he crosses over. He has people like Ben Shapiro and there's another British dude who speaks monotonously that drives me a bit crazy. And then Milo Yiannopoulos and some other people. He'll have them on as members of the alt-right movement and to attract that crowd. But he's selling something. Alex Jones is selling seeds and vitamin supplements.
But I just wonder how influential his notion, and David Icke's also, that we're all being manipulated by some giant force. I mean, in Alex's case, it's the Bilderberger crowd.
Yeah.
And in David Icke's,
it's lizard people from Andromeda.
What's he calling them now? The Archons.
It's all about. It's all about. Whether they're going to land on us from Nibiru and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's. Again, I think Icke affects people emotionally.
I'm a college-educated person. I'm listening, fascinated, and sometimes I say, why? If I can possibly imagine stuff like this in this day and age.
Sure.
That the dots can be connected in such and such a way.
And that's fine. Yeah, and again, I think that's the line that's clearly drawn, is that I think a lot of people on all elements of the political spectrum can agree on there are things outside our knowledge, and there's a great joy and fun in theorizing about those things. But when it comes to Alex Jones, he's selling something. He's selling a specific ideology that does have a political ramification to it. There's no question to it. And personally, like I said, I've been on the guy's show. I don't think he buys it. I think he's completely full of it. And I think he's getting chubby on fear. He sells fear and uses it to feed himself. And he's getting fat the same way Roger Ailes got fat. That's just the reality of it. He is there's nothing about him that says this is a true believer who, there are parts of him that do. He gets panicked occasionally. I think that's still true. But I don't think it's going to affect the vote itself from the David Icke zone and the Coast to Coast. There's an occasional fill-in host, I think, on Coast to Coast that occasionally gets all like, Hillary's an alien nonsense. But the majority of the time, they're just kind of talking to, spirit mediums and stuff like that, and have about as much effect
on the political discourse as your kind of standard daytime talk shows would when they're talking about relationships and whatnot. But appreciate the call. Let me get another caller in before the break, Lady B. Who do we have?
We have David from San Francisco.
Oh, all right.
Foggy San Francisco.
Hi. How are you, Dave?
Yeah. Howdy, Al. Hey, it's interesting. I heard you mention the security state a little while ago, or just the situation that America's in.
Right.
And to me, what I look at is as the solution to it is getting rid of these top secret budgets. Because if you think about back in 1776 or even back in the Pharaoh's time, the average person was supposed to be paying for everything, paying taxes to pay for the turd in charge, and that guy never gave us information about how the money was being spent. And it was always toward their aristocrats and their fun and games and their fear-mongering and petty rivalries between nations next door. So you think of the whole idea that Trump is out there actually picking a fight with our next-door neighbor, Mexico. He's actually trying to make trade more difficult with Mexico, even though we've sent all of those factories over there. I mean, when you think about it, can you imagine if all of a sudden they shut down the border and we can't get any products up here?
Right.
We don't have any factories anymore. All of our stuff is coming from there, and all of a sudden they could turn off the spigot and we'd have no more refrigerators.
Well, a lot of our stuff still. The interesting thing is, a lot of our stuff still comes from the Asian Peninsula, hence the TPP, and the desire for that as almost a failsafe against the failures of NAFTA itself. And ask anybody in Long Beach, California, or San Francisco, Portland, Oregon.
Benton Harbor.
That's right.
You're not.
There's tons of stuff
Harbor's
coming in that way.
where all those refrigerators used to come from.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that I don't know if you're familiar. You're down in L.A., I guess.
Yep.
But, since I'm listening to the Chicago station, Benton Harbor's just around the bend in Michigan in there.
That's right.
And that used to be the headquarters for a whole bunch of different. It's Westinghouse, or not Westinghouse. It was the Whirlpool. All of those refrigerators and air conditioners and all those. So now the company Whirlpool has now bought up so many of their competitors that they've monopolized the field, and they've outsourced all the jobs. So Whirlpool used to supply this massive amount of electrical appliances to the great Midwest up there, and now they've got to go an extra couple or few thousand miles just to get them delivered in order to save a few pennies per hour in wages.
Well, the interesting thing, too, is there's also a factor of when you talk about fuel efficiency, has created more efficient transportation of goods. And that's one of the other factors we don't really talk about in terms of why manufacturing can move elsewhere and still maintain profitability. There used to be a real impetus because you would literally physically truck stuff from where it was built to where it was going, cars being the odd exception, although we truck those as well. But when you made a washing machine, putting it on a truck and driving it, say, all the way from Mexico to Ohio was an absurdity. So you built the factories relatively close. You wanted them within, it wasn't even as much about the border as it was about distance. That you had like 3 main factory bases sectioning the country. And this was true of breweries. I mean, this is why certain brewing companies and bottling companies had literally categorized parts of the United States. You couldn't. It was bootlegging to bring Coors beer west of the Rockies or something like that. And partly that was because the bottling companies had the factory lockup monopoly on that, and that's how they equaled it out over time. Now that as things get easier to ship, as transportation and the Waltons have had the Walmart folks have had a much huge impact on this aspect, is that once they created this situation where you can kind of own the shipping lanes and truck stuff wherever you want, the positioning of your factory has zero meaning to how much money you're going to shave off as far as transportation of your goods. So then it just makes sense. Well, which direction can I go and still be on land and pay less for the construction of said item? Mexico, the obvious choice. Great point. We got to take a break. When we come back, more of your calls. 773-763-9278. Yeah, guys, the reason I know that technically it was bootlegging to bring Coors east of the Rockies was it's a plot line in Smokey and the Bandit. That's literally, but that's why, because we had a friend in high school who ran a like a beer bottling company, and they had kind of a monopoly on a sliver of the United States, like in a vertical line that went from, kind of Wisconsin through Illinois and down, and everybody else didn't bottle inside that or whatever, and that gave them sort of protected class so that they could maintain their business. And this was also so the government could keep track of who was bottling booze and for what purpose.
Less than a minute.
Okay. And that was it was super important. Like the idea, like it was literally illegal to do a microbrewery because you couldn't get the license to bottle the alcohol. You can make it all you want, but you couldn't bottle it and transport it.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
So, I guess the protected aspect of Fox News and their kind of singular hold on a certain swath of voters and a certain swath of discourse in the country in terms of representing unofficially but tacitly the Republican Party and conservative thought. At least mainstream, and I find myself, it's shocking to even say that, but mainstream Republican thought over the last at least 10 years. The fact that the day after the election, they could be effectively decimated, and that the whole thing is being held together like a cardboard kid's pirate ship, just with duct tape and markers, making it still look like a network is stunning. Essentially, all the shows themselves, the reason it still looks like a network to some degree is because they're not changing anything, and the shows themselves are just soldiering on in their time slot, sort of mechanically doing their thing as they did before, with no editorial fusing between them. And if there is any editorial fusing, it's just kind of like a shrug and I hope can more than 4 shoes drop? That's the big concern. Anyways, let's take some more calls. Lady B, who do we have? Lady B, do we have any? Are you there?
Sorry.
That's okay.
We have Cody from Kentucky.
Cool, right on. Hey, Cody, welcome.
Hey, love your show as always. One of my favorite things is you talk with us, not to us. There's no lecturing at the conversation. Thank you for that. It's very accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that I have a lot in common, I guess, with my point with Steve from the Gold Coast, but Trump seems to be the candidate that the Republican Party deserves and has created and manifested by things exactly like Fox News. I mean, remember Roger Ailes worked for Ronald Reagan? There were rumors he was pushing for a GOP TV that was shot down in the 80s. Rupert Murdoch buys Fox, and now you got Roger Ailes getting his wish of GOP TV. And that happened not terribly long after Rush Limbaugh got on the air, and it seems to me that trend has pushed this I am more conservative than you litmus test, that it goes to the most extreme version of their purest conservative values. I mean, Dwight Eisenhower Republicans don't exist anymore, but they've turned into this thing where, gods, gays, and guns, this it seems to me this immigration debate is a variant of the gays being the other. Yeah. And as long as they keep pandering to that, of course, this is the obvious trend or outcome of that kind of mentality. I mean, Eric Cantor was thrown out of office and primaried and beat because he wasn't conservative enough.
Right. It's reached an ad absurdum kind of a level with him, and it is the classic Frankenstein story. Your hubris about what you're attempting, you create this monster, and then it ends up choking you on top of your own equipment. The reality, I think you're absolutely right, and this is a strategy that they've tried to play out several times. There's a reason why a lot of the conservative voices said no to it back in the 80s, didn't like the idea. It wasn't just liberals going, you can't do that. It was conservatives inside going, no, you can't create basically Pravda and then complain about Pravda. You can't do that as a political party. And effectively, we've, with social media and all that stuff, there's a lot of, obvious categorization parties going on. And media will follow that because of how people habitually consume information these days. But the interesting thing is that Fox started out as a obviously right-leaning news organization that was winking and nodding their way through this and kind of driving people in that direction. Then, over time, they started to just they narrowed the knife, essentially. They were basically refining this, this chunk of metal into a blade over time. And now they're surprised that they keep cutting themselves. And honestly, right now, I think Trump thinks that, if and when he loses, his backup plan is to outfox Fox News, start Trump TV or some version therein. He may not name it that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did. And then after, I think it'll effectively become a corner of your cable box or a corner of the internet, not unlike Breitbart or Al Alex Jones's InfoWars. And quite frankly, the infrastructure at InfoWars as a network, as a sales organization, and all that kind of stuff is a well-oiled machine. And it doesn't take much to, borrow it, have a little more money, and turn it into a much more higher functioning version of that. And working in collusion with that, like we were kind of talking about before, is absolutely a strategy, if not to functionally create some sort of, legislative achievements, but to undermine any that you disagree with, which is effectively the current Republican strategy and has been for probably the last 12 years, is we're not going to get anything on the boards, but let's just keep them from getting anything on the boards. It's 100% defense. And unfortunately, that's not how you deal in a democracy. You have to actually implement strategy as time changes to deal with new problems as they come up. We'll have to wait and see. If the day after... I actually think Fox News might be reinvigorated if Hillary Clinton wins in a landslide, because that'll kind of pump new blood in much the way Fox has enjoyed a huge ratings heyday during the Obama years, because they've in their own minds act as a philosophical counterbalance, even though I don't think they've been up to the task. Thanks so much for the call. Can we grab another one, Lady B? Do we have somebody in there?
Yeah, we can get Dave from Sacramento.
Okay, great. Hey, Dave. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Hal?
I'm great. Go ahead.
Great. So, here's, I was watching the church in Detroit with Damarosa. I mean, can you believe that, right next to Donald Trump? That was the biggest laugh that I ever got in my whole life.
I know.
She's looking for a job, Hal. She's looking for a job to work under Donald Trump when he loses at Fox News.
And wasn't she one of the least popular people to ever come out of The Apprentice? Right?
She was horrible. She was horrible.
Yeah. So
and,
anyway,
and the fact of the matter, the fact of the matter is, Hal, is that California is all for Hillary, right? We sure has got that locked in. She's got that locked in. She's got Seattle. She's got Washington. She's got Albuquerque.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the West Coast that always puts the Democrat over the top. Always the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
It starts out slow, like in the Republican area on the East Coast, in the Southern states, and the Confederate states, like, it looks like the Republicans are winning. But when it gets to the West Coast, boom.
Right.
All hell breaks loose, and the Democrats end up taking the Republicans and ends up overthrowing them at the very last. It just does that all the time. Like with Obama, with Obama twice, with Sarah Palin and John McCain, Mitt Romney. I just saw a truck that came by my house over here by Sacramento County in Elk Grove, which is a fast-growing city. That they had this person with the back of the truck saying, "Hang Hillary," in the back of the truck.
Right.
And I said, really? Come on, dude. I mean, do you have anything to do with their time? Let's just put it this way. We know he's going to lose, and I won't be surprised that he's going to probably get his own show on Fox News and probably try to bring his ratings back in Apprentice, which that will never happen.
They're not going to bring him back for it. He won't be doing that. Yeah. But I will say this: one of the reasons why the West Coast is usually the thing that puts them over the top. It's also the first parts where they start to get on the board are the East Coast cities, the big heavily populated cities, Philadelphia, New York City, and there's two reasons for that. One is time scale. Obviously 3 hours ahead on the East Coast, polls are closing. Their votes are coming in. Volume of human beings has a huge factor on this. Low population areas tend to, as rural voting blocks, go for conservative candidates who are more gun friendly, because these people live in the sticks surrounded by other rednecks, and they genuinely believe they need a gun, because by the time they call the cops, the police response time at their house is somewhere in the odds of 25 to 90 minutes. So they view themselves as their own police force, and they're not necessarily wrong in believing that. So what they will do is they'll just side with whoever seems the most Second Amendment friendly, not recognizing that cities have a different egg to crack when it comes to gun violence, and can't make kind of a decision about, look, you'll be able to keep your rifles and your shotguns and your M16 out in the middle of nowhere, but you can't sell them at a gun show to a stranger in a straw purchase in the middle of a parking lot. That's what we're trying to fix. They don't really think in those terms. They just go, look, I live in the middle of nowhere, and if somebody tries to hurt me, and I know Gary down the road is 2 days away from going on another drunken shooting binge, I want my gun when that happens. They'll tend to vote Republican, and that's what that clinging to guns comment from Obama meant years ago, which was, I think, misread as a put down, not understanding that this is just a different experience. He said to gun owners and gun lobbyists and people trying to activists on both sides were talking past each other, not actually talking about the issues that they can deal with. That being said, those people vote Republican right away. They vote early in the day. Sometimes they early vote, but they vote usually midday, and it's done. By 6 or 7 o'clock, a lot of these counties that don't have a lot of human beings in them, they've done all their counting, and that stuff goes on the board immediately. So the Republicans get this kind of burst of, oh, wow, we're taking these electoral votes, we're taking these counties, the Steve Kornackis of the world. If there is another Steve Kornacki, there may not be. He may be a singular human being. But in terms of his skill is looking at an electoral map. But when you're looking at those elements, then you start moving into the higher density population areas where there are a lot of human beings, by the way, who live their lives rubbing elbows with people who are different from them and getting along just fine. They don't have a really narrow view of what it's like to get along with another human being, this xenophobic us or them kind of idea that you do have when you live in the woods by yourself. And by the way, that's true across a lot of cultures. A lot of your rural communities, not just in the United States, but across the world, view strangers very differently than people who live in big cities. Big cities tend to be more democratic, more open, partly out of utility, but also because of experience. And as those cities roll in, the big ones, then that's where Democrats usually pull ahead in national elections and win on electoral votes and on popular votes, going back, now to Clinton, even when the electoral votes were given to the Republican case of George Bush. So we'll be back with more of your calls and the happy ending after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide.
We have two more callers.
Cool.
Earl from Hyde Park and Matt from Chicago.
Okay, cool. We'll get them both in as soon as we come in, and then I'll do a little bit of the happy ending.
No. 20 seconds.
Cool.
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. It's now time for the happy ending.
Welcome back. We got 2 more callers before we get into our happy ending. Who do we have first, Lady B?
We have Earl from Hyde Park.
Cool. Hey, Earl, welcome.
Hey, buddy, I won't take up too much of your time because you're winding down, so I'll just want one thing on the table.
Sure.
When we were talking about Detroit earlier and,
Right.
Trump going there and trying to appeal, a lot of the talking heads who represent Latinos or Hispanics say they are voting for Trump because Obama wasn't able to get the immigration bill passed.
Right, yeah,
And
because that's on his
I find
lap.
that's kind of like a rationalization because at the time that we had the Democratic majority was only for about, let's say, about a month, and we did have an economy that was falling off the cliff. And there was only so much you could get done without trying to jeopardize what he was trying to do. And you got to remember that the Senate did pass an immigration bill that the House has not allowed to hit the floor.
That's right.
And so the president at fault for that is just looking for an excuse not to vote for him and not to be realistic. But it's kind of like joining your enemy going to Trump because the Republican Party is the one that's holding it up in the House.
That's
So,
right. Well, it's also a
that
cartoon
logic
in terms
I
of
really don't find good at all. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to get that out there.
No, I appreciate it.
Next
Yeah.
week maybe we'll talk about Campbell a little bit. Okay.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thanks for the
All right,
call.
buddy.
Yeah,
Good
cheers.
program.
I will thank you. I would say that in lieu of the Congress actually pushing through the comprehensive immigration reform that the Senate passed and is trying to get through there, the president has done a number of signing statements and executive orders specifically dealing with what he can do within his purview as president, within the parameters of what he's legally able to do, as much as he can, in lieu of the fact that they will not move on that. Again, this is the Red Rover style governing aspect of the Republican-held House, which is crucial. Anyways, let's go to one more caller, and then we've got the happy ending. Who do we have, Lady B?
We have Matt from Chicago.
Cool. Hey, Matt, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Happy Labor Day weekend. So,
Thanks.
I'll make this quick. I've always gone under the idea that Fox News was never supposed to last. And the reason why they weren't supposed
That's
to
fascinating.
last,
Okay.
I'm going to go movie analogy on this, so bear with me.
I'm with you.
sure
Let's hear it.
watched Star Wars. So, Star Wars. Darth Vader, in A New Hope, he's a big, big bad, right? He runs the Empire. You get to The Empire Strikes Back, the Emperor comes along, the Empire basically morphs into something else. Fox News was always a placeholder for whatever this media thing Trump is going to do is going to be called. And we think that this is, on some level, it is a very good thing that this will more than likely be the downfall of Fox News. However, what rises in its place will be 10 times as scary, because if this is Trump's network and Mr. Hannity is going to be the Bill O'Reilly of that network, which I'm just assuming, we have no confirmations yet, we should be very, very, very afraid of these people. Everybody keeps saying that they shouldn't get content that Hillary's going to win because Trump may win. I don't think he's going to win, but if he does, we cannot be content with having these new Fox, whatever you want to call it, DDT Trump TV, Donald Trump TV.
Right. Here's the thing. I agree with you on a certain front that there is a group of Republicans who have held that something more pure than Fox News needs to exist, and that they've kind of, Shep Smith and some of the other people there have always rubbed them the wrong way. Megyn Kelly's not as much of a purist as they would like. That it is no question they would prefer it otherwise. And as far as Rush Limbaugh goes, the Heritage Foundation, has been basically guaranteeing funding on his show for a great long while, especially after all of his advertisers started to take a powder because they didn't like what he was actually saying on the show that they were paying for. That being said, you may be right that Trump TV goes more hateful, more xenophobic, more specifically awful than Fox News per se. If they do so, though, they run the risk of, and I think they will, narrowcast so ferociously that they won't attract enough to maintain the size of a regular network. And you can't become sort of the white supremacy network and expect some sort of, is how far they would have to go to push to that next step, and garner yourself enough of an audience to make yourself a profit worth talking about. And that's the part that they're running up against. The reality of Fox currently is that the biggest moneymaker for Fox as a studio in terms of television over the last 30 years has not been Fox News as an arm. It's been The Simpsons, and that Fox News as a news organization has done well in the ratings, but that ratings bump that they enjoyed happened strategically and curiously right about the time Roger Ailes bought the Nielsen Company and moved it from the United States to France, where it currently resides, its corporate headquarters. So your ratings are decided now by a French multinational company owned by Rupert Murdoch. And magically, Fox News has since then been number one. Not because they've earned it. And oddly enough, they have the oldest and the most dying off crowd as far as viewerships of any news organization, but they manage to end up number one all the time. And it may be because their audience is retired and they don't do anything but watch the channel, and that guarantees an automatic pump. And they do have more eyeballs, but those people aren't buying anything, or they're certainly not anything other than age-related back medication and if you watch Fox late at night, catheters. The reality is, it's going further than Fox News has gone is not necessarily from an economic perspective, a smart move. And if I thought these guys were genuinely purists about their thought, especially Trump, it would concern me because they would effectively be the David Dukes of the world. I don't think they are. I think they might lean that way, and I think if you let them have their way, they might do it. But if you push back at all and go, it's this or money, they'll take the money every time. That's the truth. So I appreciate the call. I think it's an important angle, and it's time for the happy ending because we only got a couple minutes left. Here's the big one. This is the happy ending. Okay, so there's a leading organization called Charity Navigator. They are a leading and respected organization that evaluates and rates charities so donors can make informed decisions about contributions. It was itself a member of the Clinton Global Initiative between 2012 and 2014. But they're not now. They have not been for a couple of years. And they have rated the Clinton Foundation as having 4 out of 5 stars, the highest rating that the Charity Navigator gives for a close look at a charity's finances. The rating is based on an annual federal tax documents it gets. It was not intended to reflect whether Hillary Clinton kept donors to her family's foundation at appropriate arm's length or provided favored access, but the use of the finances throughout the charity have rated the highest rating from that a charity can get under their marker. Let's be abundantly clear. If anybody says that Hillary Clinton needs to distance herself from the Clinton Foundation and does not at the same breath say that Donald Trump's connections to Russia are curious and he needs to specifically denounce, distance, and financially eliminate his monetary ties to that country, they are full of it and they're selling something. Thank you guys for listening. Thanks everybody for joining the chat today. You guys have been wonderful. Don't forget to like and subscribe on the YouTube channel, Hal Sparks Live. And then, of course, hashtag HSRPM if you ever want to talk or send stories my way during the week. We'll be back next week with more of the show. You guys are awesome. I'll be in Austin, Texas, and Dallas next week. Week after that, I will be in Indianapolis. So thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Cheers. Thanks, Lady B. All right. Bye, guys. I got to pack up. You're awesome. Bye.